We are back with Diddy's trial finally ending. I don't know about y'all, but I haven't really been keeping up with it that much. And I was actually shocked that they made it to closing the trial as early as they did, because remember, they were supposed to try to go into right before the 4th of July, which I guess they're kind of doing that because they're doing closing arguments today, tomorrow, and then the jury will have time to deliberate. And then maybe, just maybe, we'll have a decision before the 4th of July weekend. Now, what I have to say about the trial so far and the closing arguments that was presenting is, what the heck did they find on all those terabytes and terabytes of what do you call it? Computers that they took from Diddy's houses? Like, what was the point of taking those computers from Diddy's houses? Because I don't see what evidence came from those computers. Everything it sounds like they had came from their phones and not their computers, but their email addresses, which they would have had access to on the phone. So I'm almost on the defensive side of, like, y'all went and took all of that information when you really didn't even need it, and you really didn't even use it. You just kind of invaded his privacy, because remember, they were saying that the subpoena or the warrant was too broad and they were just basically asking for any and everything. I thought they were going to come out with some stuff like Diddy is, harboring children in the basement or something of that nature, right? But no, it's just he had freak offs with Cassie. He had freak offs with Jane. He had essayed his assistant. Those were all things that I don't think we needed the information from his computers from. But y'all let me know what y'all think about it. We are going to get into what the prosecution had to say in tying up their case. And in tying up their case, they don't mention any evidence that I think they needed to get from his computers. And so if you have been watching my earlier coverage on this case, I kept saying that I don't think Diddy is going to succeed on not Diddy is going to succeed. He does not want them to succeed. I don't think that the prosecution is going to succeed on the conspiracy. But I did go back and read the superseding indictment. If y'all watch my channel, you know I'm not a criminal lawyer. I am a lawyer, but not a criminal lawyer. So I'm kind of going through the motions and learning things with you guys as well. And it does seem like maybe, just maybe, on some of the elements, he could be convicted under the RICO charge. Now, do I think it's the best allegation against him, best claims against him? No, I think they have surefire shots at the sex trafficking and the prostitution. I think they could have brought this case with just this. And I don't see any RICO really, like, yes, he's saying people work for him. Sure. Yes. Okay. I get that. But also it's like, it's not really that strong. And it's a little weird, right? Because they're doing their job. They're working for him. The question is, did they know they were engaging in a crime, right? Or were they just trying to please their boss? Versus someone that is, in a drug enterprise. You know that you are going to the boss because they have the drugs. You're buying drugs from them, and then you're distributing them and you're making money. Versus he is just he's a rapper, and you work for him and you're his assistant, and he tells you to do something because you're his assistant and you do it. So are they voluntarily engaging in criminal activity, or are they just doing what their boss told you? They're not active. In my opinion, it doesn't seem like they're actively like, yeah, I want to be a part of Bad Boy because I want to pay girls to, engage in prostitution. I'm probably going to get red flagged on this video already because everything in this trial is crazy that we're going to be talking about. So I just told y'all that I pulled up the superseding indictment, the third one, and I didn't pull it up on my computer. So let me actually grab that so that our discussions can be fruitful today. And like I said, we are live right now. So let me know your thoughts on everything. If you're watching live, if you're watching on the replay, drop your comments in the comment section and I will try to get to them. So let me just figure out where I put this document. I was having some technical difficulties earlier, so that's what made me even later than the late post that I made today anyway. So let's where is my document? Why are you not here? No, y'all, I don't think it's in here. But I literally just put it in here. So let me do 9. It's somewhere. It's just not in the folder I thought it was in. So we got the document. It's all good. If you guys have not already, please do hit the like button. It does help the channel out. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump into this. I'm having technical difficulties with StreamYard, so please bear with me in the images that are coming across the screen because I have to remember which one actually works for us. So it would be helpful if I actually share what I need to share. So where are we at? We're going to present, and we're going to share the screen, and we're going to go to the superseded indictment. Okay, and now add it to the stage. Okay, there we go. It's still doing funky stuff. I don't know why it looks like that, but whatever. It's still doing funky stuff. We'll work through it. Okay, and now it's going to keep it in the corner. Oh gosh. Oh gosh, StreamYard, thank you very much. Whatever, we'll do it like this until I'm no longer needing this document anyway. So let's get our life together because I am not together right now. Let's go ahead. Let's bring Bossy B to kind of reset everything, okay? Bossy B. All right, y'all. So if you missed the intro, we are talking about Diddy, and the conclusion of his criminal trial is coming right up. The prosecution gave their closing arguments today, and then Diddy's attorneys are going to do his closing arguments tomorrow. Now, we covered a couple of what I would say were the more important witnesses. We talked about Cassie's testimony. We talked about some of the escorts' testimony, some of the assistants' testimony. We didn't talk about Jane's testimony. Hers was pretty long as well, but she was also one of the victims that they accused Diddy of sex trafficking and basically forcing her into this freak off enterprise that he was pretty much conducting. So we didn't cover that, but it's very similar to what Cassie had going on, and the closing arguments did use a lot of the things that Jane talked about in her testimony in order to close out and say he is guilty of these crimes. Now, like I said, I don't know if they really proved it all the way, but I do think that they are on the right track with the sex trafficking and the prostitution part of it. The thing that we were talking about is whether he's going to qualify for the RICO, because I feel like that is the hardest claim that's being brought against him. And it seems like the prosecution, and I don't know because I wasn't there, I'm just going off of a source that I'm reading. I only went to one source, y'all, because I only had time to go to one source. But the things that they pointed out, the prosecution addressed, they didn't really stick on the RICO part of it too long. And we're going to kind of talk about what the superseded indictment says is required for RICO and whether we think that the prosecution met that burden, while also going through the facts that the prosecution used in their closing arguments today. I thought it was pretty insane that the defense only used 30 minutes for their case. And the thing about it is they are not here to prove Diddy is innocent, right? They're here to poke holes in the prosecution's story in order to say that they did not prove their burden because it is the prosecution's burden beyond a reasonable doubt. Defense job is to throw doubt in that, and they did it by questioning the prosecution witnesses on cross-examination, and they didn't call any of their own witnesses. Now, did I think that not calling their own witnesses was going to lead into a 30-minute defense? No, I'm like, at that point, we might as well have just skipped the whole defense, but whatever, they did it nonetheless. So let's go ahead and jump into, once I get there, we're going to jump into the actual RICO and what's required for RICO. So let's see, which one did I want to do? The enterprise. What is the enterprise? Okay. And so let's talk about Diddy's enterprise. And I know some of you watched like the Young Thug trial, and that one was like, okay, we're calling hits on people. But in Diddy's situation, he's not really calling hits on people. He's kind of doing everything for his own enjoyment. So let's go ahead and bring the document up and put me little again. Okay. And so let's see. This is what they're saying is Combs's enterprise. So from at least in or about 2004 through in or about 2024, Diddy, the defendant, and others, known and unknown, were members and associates of a criminal organization, members and associate of Combs Enterprise, engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other activities, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for the purposes of prostitution, coercion and enticement to engage in prostitution, narcotic offenses, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. So the things that I think that they have a good handle on is the sex trafficking. Forced labor is a little iffy for me. I didn't go back and read the code section on that, so we probably aren't going to talk about that much today. But the prostitution, the transportation for the purpose of prostitution, I think they have that in the bag. Coercion and enticement to engage in prostitution, they have that in the bag. Narcotic offenses, although I hate to say it, they probably have that one in the bag as well. And we'll talk about why. And then the kidnapping, at first I said, no, they don't have kidnapping. But what they did kidnapping under was California law and New York law. And under California law, they don't meet the burden for kidnapping. But under New York law, they will meet the burden for kidnapping. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. The arson, I didn't really go back and read the statute on that because yes, the car was set on fire. I think where they have an issue is no one definitively said it was Diddy. It's all kind of like circumstantial. We think it was Diddy and who else would do it? Like, okay, just because he made some threats doesn't necessarily mean he automatically was the person that did it. And then we got bribery. I think they're probably going to have that one in the bag. And obstruction of justice. I didn't look that much into that one as far as what evidence they used to show the obstruction of justice. They did talk about it, but it was right along the lines with the bribery, like the giving people money or saying, I'll give you money, or saying, I'll give you money if you agree with my story. So those are the things that they are putting under the RICO. And like I said, at first, when we first talked about this, I thought he's going to be nowhere near RICO. But after reading off that list, and like taking a moment to digest things, they might actually get him on RICO on a couple of things. And let's remember, for this RICO, they only have to prove that he did 2 of them. And so far, I think they've definitely proved the sex trafficking, and I think they definitely proved the prostitution and the enticement and the coercion for prostitution. So I kind of think they proved all of that. And I know the line gets a little muddy of whether this was a relationship and they were just trying to please their partner, or if this was full on prostitution. And we'll talk about the elements of the prostitution. We'll talk about it. Okay. So let's keep going. They go on to say that Combs Enterprise includes its leadership, its members and associates, constituted an enterprise by the definition under the statute. His enterprise consisted of himself, entities of the Combs business, including but not limited to Bad Boy Entertainment. I don't think they really proved that. Combs Enterprises and Combs Global, individuals employed and associated with Combs business, and other known and unknown people. Then Combs Enterprise constituted an ongoing organization whose members function as a continuing unit for a common purpose of achieving the objectives of the Combs Enterprise. The Combs Enterprise was engaged in its activities affected interstate and foreign commerce. That's because they were crossing state lines and paying prostitutes money across state lines, buying drugs across state lines, all of those things. So we are affecting interstate commerce. The Combs Enterprise operated in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere. Remember, they are suing, or they're not suing, but they're bringing these charges under federal law, California state law, and New York state law. Okay. We don't need to go through all of that. And so they're essentially saying his security guards, his household staff, his assistants, they are all a part of this enterprise. And for me, I'm like, some of the assistants was kind of victims of the enterprise, i.e. Mia, who they use a lot in the closing argument, that he was also SAing her and forcing her to work long hours and all of the things. So a lot of his actual employees were also victims. And so I think that's where it gets a little bit messy as far as whether enterprise or whether the racketeering comes in, because is there an actual organization? Now they talk about Karam, what's her name? I forgot her last name. They talk about that main assistant and his security staff and things of that nature. But the interesting thing is that they did not testify, which could be a sign that they are going to try to bring charges against them. I was kind of shocked that all of the information did come out, because I would have objected to everything they were saying that she was doing, as, you know, not saying what she was doing, but yeah, no, saying what she was doing as irrelevant. She's not here. She's not here to testify. And then also the stuff that the assistant was saying as hearsay. Like, why are we introducing text messages that she's sending to Diddy? Like, no, I'm going to object to that as hearsay. And maybe they had some type of exception that I'm not privy to, because I was not in the courtroom of what it is. Defendant's state of mind, Diddy's state of mind, all of those things can come into play of like, this is what he was communicating. He knew he was engaged in bad activity. So essentially the other person's comments came in. That could have been the exception to the hearsay rule. Okay. And so they say, this is where they get me on the RICO, is that the purpose of his organization was like literally his enjoyment. But I think the thing I focused on previously was that they were saying the purpose of the this part of it, the purpose operating a global business. The purpose of Comb Enterprise, including the following: operating a global business in the media, entertainment, and lifestyle industries, including, among other things, record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirit business, a marketing agency, and a television network and media company. Now, I do not think that any of these things were the purpose of what he was doing with the freak-offs. Like, I don't see how the freak-offs benefited any of these, the media, entertainment, the lifestyle, the alcohol business. None of that really benefited what he was, to make it a criminal enterprise, right? But the thing that they do kind of focus on after that is the protecting, promoting, preserving, and enhancing the power and reputation of Diddy, his brand, and making sure he remains this popular musician, entrepreneur, and figure in the entertainment industry. And then they go on to say its purpose was also enriching members and associates of the enterprise, including its leaders, Combs, in particular those who demonstrated loyalty to Combs and willingness to conceal his crimes. So they are essentially saying this was beneficial for Diddy and the members, because of course it's beneficial for Diddy. He likes the freak offs. He likes to see the nasty things, right? But it's beneficial for Diddy even further, his employees. They are going to do what Diddy say because he holds the money, right? They're not going to get paid if they don't do what Diddy says. They're going to get fired if they don't do what Diddy says. So he's essentially enriching the freak offs, are enriching the employees, because if they don't do what Diddy says, he's not going to pay him. He's going to fire him. He's going to get somebody else to do it. So with that allegation, I'm like, okay, I see where you guys are going there, but is it that they were just employees, or were they actually engaged in a criminal enterprise? I don't know. They go on to talk about preserving his power again. They also talk about fulfilling the personal desire of Diddy, particularly those related to his sexual gratification, including through exploitation of women and the use of commercial sex workers, enabling Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise to engage in unlawful acts of violence, including sexual violence, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate commerce, or interstate transportation for the purpose of prostitution, coercion and enticement to engage in prostitution, narcotics distribution, and other crimes, and concealing the commission of such acts. So basically, we're going to pay you guys off so that you don't come out and talk about it. The purpose was also securing absolute loyalty from members of the Comb enterprise, including through acts of violence and threats. Remember him getting everybody in the car, like, come with us, I got guns, we're about to go intimidate these people. And then another purpose is protecting the Combs enterprise and its members and associates, including Combs, from the detection of prosecution by law enforcement authorities through acts of intimidation, manipulation, bribery, threats of retaliation against individuals who witness the crimes committed by members and associates of the enterprise. So with that basis of what they are saying is Diddy's enterprise, the purpose of the enterprise, do you think that they meet their burden? I think the biggest piece missing for me is going to be the people and how much they were actually involved. Like, I definitely get that yes, they paid people off. Yes, they asked them to be quiet. Yes, they helped heal the injuries. But was it for a common interest in what they're basically saying? Protecting Diddy's sexual gratification, protecting his reputation. Normally, when we see RICO, we're talking about, we're selling drugs across the country and we're not snitching, because if we snitch, we're going to jail too. But these people are not doing the beating for him. They just drove him because they're his driver, right? That's part of their job. These people are paying the money, but they're not doing it so that their reputation is not harmed. They're doing it because that is part of their job. So I think they need to make the link a little bit more of, okay, this was the purpose. They knew coming into this job, messing with well, I'm sure they all sign NDAs, but you dealing with me, Diddy, you're going to have to intimidate people. You're going to have to do these things. You're going to have to do these things. But I don't remember there being really any evidence of like Karam being also the one to intimidate. It's just, all right, yeah, he sucks, kind of like how maybe your mother might do. You go and tell on your significant others to their mother, and their mother goes, oh yeah, sometimes he gets a little angry. Would we also call that aiding and abetting, right? Those are the questions that would need answers. And sometimes we do, right? And sometimes we do. So let's go ahead and jump into some of the facts that the prosecution used in their closing arguments to basically make the argument that Diddy is going to jail, right? He committed these crimes. He engaged in a RICO conspiracy. He engaged in the prostitution, the sex trafficking, all the things. Like I said at the beginning of the stream, I think they got him surefire on the prostitution and the sex trafficking, which are basis for the actual RICO. They got to tie it together of the enterprise. The whole part of the RICO is the enterprise. And I do think them not calling certain witnesses might support their theory that, yeah, this is an enterprise because we're going after her next. As soon as you guys convict him, we're going after hers next. I still don't really like that they didn't really use any evidence. Like, we got millions of hours of video. Did the video not show anything of interest? Like, y'all already had the freak off videos. Like, what videos? What was the baby oil for? His attorney made his own speculations. Like, could it have been to fill up a pool with baby oil? Sir, no, he wasn't filling up pools with baby oil. Was having a baby oil fight? Yeah, I mean, I guess they did that back in the day. Like, those they were getting like a little chocolate blow up pool filled with chocolate, and they make people wrestle in it. That's basically what he was hinting at was happening. So I don't know what weird stuff his attorney is into, but whatever. So let's see. We got some comments that came in. So let's see what the comments have to say, and then we'll get into the facts that the prosecution is using, which I think highly, highly focuses on the actual sex trafficking element of it, because I do think those are their strongest arguments. So we got Kimmy Locker, member, moderator, consultant, paralegal of the channel. Welcome back in, saying hello. BriHive, hello, and welcome back. I know I was missing in action for the last 2 weeks. I celebrated Juneteenth last Thursday, and I forgot to tell y'all, and then I just been kind of swamped since then, so I'm sorry I've been MIA from the channel. Sarah says, hello, I'm looking forward to hearing more. Well, I hope we're going to get into it. I know I had a kind of long intro today, but I wanted to give that background of what the RICO was and whether you think it makes a little bit more sense for the RICO versus what we probably were thinking before, right? Just the facts. Love the name. Saying drug distribution does not require a sale. Sharing drugs with friends is direct evidence that a person engaged in the distribution of narcotics. Diddy is guilty of the drug distribution. Easy charge. I agree with you there. I do agree with you there. Just the fact says proven arson in court involves a combination of physical evidence, expert testimony, witness statements, and circumstantial evidence. The government proved all the elements if the jury believes it. So remember, with the government proving the elements, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. And to me, although they said it was probably Diddy, it makes the most sense to be Diddy. they didn't really prove it was Diddy, right? And yes, you can get convictions on circumstantial evidence, but I do think that the defense also casted some doubt in whether it was Diddy that did it. Not, we can all assume it's him, right? But there was no hardcore evidence that it was actually him. And then he goes, just the fact says Diddy paid $100K to a security guard for surveillance footage in a signed agreement, barring the guard from speaking. This evidence of obstruction of justice and bribery, enough for RICO. It's over. And like I said, it also has to be the actual organization, right? They have to be involved in, this is what I want to do, versus them just being his employees and doing what's in their job description as well. So I do think that after reading the list of the crimes that they're accusing him of, those elements are met for pretty much all of them, right? The thing that I think they're missing is the actual organization of it. Yes, you're accusing an assistant of, organizing the hotel rooms and things of that nature. But what's the difference of an office assistant organizing a hotel room versus him organizing the hotel room? It doesn't really benefit the people working for him, if that makes sense, right? With the organization. They're not getting street cred. They're just continuing to be employed by him. So I think that's the part that's going to be pretty interesting on the RICO part. But I agree that everything that they're putting out there, he probably did. The jury probably will agree, like, hey, this is all that's required to say he distributed drugs. No, he doesn't have to sell them. Same thing with the prostitution, which we're going to get into. He made Cassie and Jane and whoever go across state lines to engage in prostitution. They don't actually have to be the ones being paid for the prostitution. They're just engaged in prostitution. They're hiring prostitutes, right? Or he's hiring prostitutes for him and making them engage with them. Yes, we have those elements. I think they have that down pat. I'm missing the organization. So if anybody has anything on the organization part of it, please let me know. Again, all of that are these people going to think this is supplying party favors? Although you shouldn't be distributing drugs, but some people might look at that as something similar to, like, if you're having a party at your house, you're probably going to buy alcohol, right? He's thinking, I'm having a party at my house. My friends like to do drugs, so I'm going to bring drugs, right? Although it's illegal, yes, it is illegal, but are there going to be people on the jury? Remember, it has to be unanimous. Are there going to be people on the jury that act in the drug bringing to the party, similar to the alcohol bringing to the party? I think this trial to me lacked luster. To say, I don't know how else to say it, it lacked luster because all of the lawsuits that came out, Tony Busby, Cassie, everybody, blah, 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 came out and said that he was drugging people. People were drinking alcoholic beverages, and then next thing they knew, they were woozy. I don't remember any evidence, and y'all can fault me because I didn't keep up with the whole trial day by day, okay? So I may have missed some things, but I don't think there was any evidence about him accidentally drugging anyone. And I know those aren't the elements that are supposed to be proven, right? I think they have the elements that have to be proven. I think as far as the unanimous decision on whether there was a organization that he was participating in versus this just being his own self-pleasure and him inappropriately using his business, i.e. piercing the corporate veil to basically make the whole organization responsible for what he's doing individually. I think that is where the jury is going to have a hard time with the RICO aspect of it. I don't think I really finished my thought on the whole drug thing, but yes, we know he was giving drugs to people. I just thought there was going to be more evidence of, oh yeah, those little tubes they were putting in the drinks. Where did that end up going? Nothing ever came of any of that information. They said that there was drugs in the baby oil. Nothing ever came of that information. So I think that's where I was a little bit disappointed with the trial, because all the lawsuits just made it seem like he was this, drugging people unknowingly, right? And yes, I still think he's a horrible person, but they didn't really prove he was as bad of a person as they were trying to make him seem. Like, he's a bad guy, but they didn't prove that he was like secretly drugging anyone. He was coercing people. He was domestic violence. He was all of the things, right? But the stuff that the other lawsuits, and I know those ones weren't on trial, those, I thought we were going to get more tea, okay? I thought we were going to get more information. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'm sorry, y'all, I have not slept like all week, so it's hard for me to find my words right now. So thank y'all for bearing with me. Sarah said, you really helped me understand RICO. Thank you. I'm just literally reading the superseded indictment of what aspects of RICO they're going after, because with every organization, it's going to be something different. Like if you are into a Ponzi scheme, or if you're into drug sales, or if you're into illegal gambling ring and things like that, there's going to be different things you're going to be going after in order to protect the RICO, right? In order to protect the organization. But here, I think it's a mix between you're employed by this person versus you're actively participating in criminal acts that you're intending to participate in, right? Versus, hey, I need you to take me up the street to Kid Cudi's house. Did the driver know that, hey, we're going up here to intimidate him, right? Because again, we don't even have Diddy at the scene. And so, like the arson thing, we don't even have Diddy at the scene. Circumstantial guesses, educated guesses, sure. But did they throw enough doubt in there for someone, one person on the jury to say no? Okay, I've been rambling too much. So let's go ahead and jump into some of the facts of the case. I am going to be reading from an article for some of this because I don't remember everything. I don't remember everything off the top of my head. And as you guys can see, I've already been struggling with my words as we've been going. So let's go on. So we have Christy Slavic. I think I'm saying this right. Is it Slavic or Slavic? But Christy Slavic began her closing arguments. Over the last several weeks, you've learned a lot about Sean Diddy Combs. He's a leader of a criminal enterprise. Again, I don't know if he established the criminal enterprise. Is he weird? Is he dangerous? Yes. Is it an enterprise? I don't know. I don't know if it's an enterprise, but let's go on. He doesn't take no for an answer, and now you know about many crimes the defendant committed with members of his enterprise. Again, a lot of the crimes was just him. And then his assistants was also being threatened, so they were victim too, that he was coercing them too. So I don't know. I know we got free will. It'll be an interesting one. Let's go on. Slavic listed some of the alleged crimes Combs committed, including kidnapping, arson, forced labor, and bribery, before turning to what she called the brutal crimes at the heart of the case, sex trafficking, which I think that one is a slam dunk. I've already said it a million times. You heard about all the defendant again and again, you heard all about how the defendant again and again forced, threatened, and manipulated Cassie, Ventura, and Jane to have sex with escorts for his own entertainment. We go on to say that, or she reminded the jury of what she called two shockingly similar incidents 8 years apart, when Diddy assaulted Cassie in March 2016 at the Intercontinental, and when he assaulted Jane in her home on June 2024. They're not separate stories. They're chapters of the same book, the story of Sean Combs and the criminal enterprise he led, made up of his inner circle. The enterprise, according to the Slavic, serviced the defendant's pattern of violence, coercion, and manipulation. I'm gonna read it, and y'all let me know your thoughts. Yes, I think Diddy did all of that, okay? I don't know if we can make him into a whole organization. He just sounds like he's bullying everybody. But hey, you could say they could have quit their job. But we saw the other dude get threatened and his daughter get threatened and all of that stuff. So like I said, I think some of the assistants are victims as well. But let's go on. I don't see the organization. I see Diddy being an a-hole, but a whole organization, I don't know. I don't know about that. And it does only need to be two people, sadly. So maybe it is him and Karam. Let's keep going on. The defendant counted on silence and shame to keep his crimes hidden. He thought that his fame, wealth, and power put him above the law, but over the course of the trial, his crimes have been exposed. She says she'll review the assaults in more detail later. Okay, the defendant was a very powerful man, but he became more powerful and more dangerous because of the support of his inner circle and his business, the enterprise. Let's see. She said that the enterprise purpose was to serve and protect the defendant, which is Diddy. Diddy was at the top of his enterprise. Remember, it's his kingdom. Everyone was there to serve him. She lists, the prosecutor lists ways the enterprise served him, including by promoting and protecting his reputation, fulfilling his personal and sexual desires, enabling him and his inner circle to commit crimes, and protecting them from law enforcement. And so if you guys were at the beginning of the stream, the thing that they kind of geared away from, which was the first sentence in the actual indictment as far as what the enterprise was his business. The fact that he's a rapper, the fact that he had the alcohol company, the fact that he had the media companies. That was the main focus, or the first focus in this indictment. In this closing argument, they don't bring that up at all. And I think it's because what he's doing, it doesn't benefit his actual business, right? It only benefits him personally. He's the one getting satisfaction from the freak offs. He's the one shelling out the money. He's not making any money from what he's doing. He's shelling out money. So this is like, to me, it's kind of like a reverse RICO, because normally when you're involved in a RICO, you're making money off of the illegal things that you're doing. But in his case, he's not making any money. He's just spending money and then paying people to shut up about it, which sounds like a very bad business plan to me, but it's his business plan nonetheless. So as far as the RICO go in this situation, that's why I'm saying it's kind of hard for me to say the organization, because it's not like the freak offs are making him money and then he's paying his assistants more because they're getting people to be quiet. It's that he's making money off of his music and then he's paying his assistants. And he asked them to do extra things on the side. So I thought it was interesting in the closing argument that they didn't focus on, or I didn't think it was interesting, I thought it needed to happen, that they didn't focus on the music industry and his media companies and everything else, because none of that benefited from the evidence that we was given, right? Him being involved in hotel rooms, doing freak offs and having hotels mad at him because he's leaving baby oil all over the place. None of that benefits his business, but it does benefit him personally. It's all about him in the situation. So let's keep going on. The prosecutor, Christy Slavic, said she'll move through the counts and tell the jury how the government proved its case against Sean Diddy Combs at trial. She's using a PowerPoint to guide her presentation. She laid out the elements the government must prove for the jury to convict Combs of count 1, the racketeering conspiracy. There was a conspiracy to participate in Combs' enterprise. I think that one is scary. I think that's a scary line to go down, to say if you wanted to work for Diddy, right, you're participating in his illegal activity. I think that one is a little unfair. So that's the first part of the conspiracy. There was a conspiracy to participate in Combs' enterprise. I definitely agree that there was a conspiracy to work for Diddy, but I don't know if there was a conspiracy for them to participate in the wrongdoing, or are they also scared? Which we had several assistants, 3 assistants or 4 or 5 assistants come up and testify about how they were scared of Diddy, right? Okay, so the Combs enterprise affected interstate and foreign commerce. We know that because he was flying everywhere from Miami to California to New York to Ibiza. He was everywhere. So we know it's affecting interstate commerce. The defendant knowingly and willfully became a member of the conspiracy. They're basically saying he is the conspiracy. So yes, he is knowingly and willingly a member of this conspiracy, or of this situation, because it only benefits him. It only benefits him. And then the defendant knowingly and willfully agreed that he or another member of the conspiracy will commit 2 racketeering crimes. The question is, which racketeering crimes did the other people commit? Okay. What did the other people commit? I think it creates a very dangerous line between what people do in their normal life. Like, yes, there are some people that kind of misappropriate their business and use their assistants for their business to help them do other things. But like, let's say, let me just give this example. let's say you're married, right? You and your husband, we're going to make it a lady and a man, husband and wife, they're married. They're into hiring escorts, i.e., what's happening here, right? Let's say the husband is let's make the woman a doctor, okay? Let's give the woman the money, okay? She owns her own medical practice. And her husband decides that they're gonna, they live in California, they're gonna go to Texas, and when they get to Texas, they're gonna hire a couple of prostitutes because that's what they like to do. And let's say she forgot her regular credit cards and she puts it on the business credit card. She writes it off as an expense, her little excursion, right? Let's say it's a company bonding time. I don't know. Let's say the husband works for her. Are we then going to accuse her and her husband of being involved in a RICO because she used her medical card, her business card, to buy a prostitute in a different state? I know Diddy's situation was a lot worse, right? It's a lot worse, and also prostitution is illegal, so they shouldn't be doing that anyways. But are we going to go after all the people, even the small fish, for buying prostitutes while in a relationship? Or let's say the assistant at the medical office booked the hotel. Should that medical assistant then be deemed a part of her enterprise because her and her husband are into some freaky stuff? I don't know if I'm willing to go that far. And I feel like this case is going on a slippery slope by saying just because you work for someone and you know that person is into some weird stuff, you are also as guilty as them. Now, the Karam lady, she might be just as guilty as Diddy. I don't know. But she didn't come out and talk. But I do think that you can end up on a very slippery slope if you start saying that just because you work for someone and you know what weird stuff they're into, I guess you couldn't get in trouble for not snitching. But people don't like to snitch. I don't know. I'm just trying to play devil advocate here. And I'm confusing myself. Because yes, you could still go to jail for that. But I don't know if I would call that a RICO. I would just say you are, aiding and abetting. I would not say it's a RICO. Okay. I wouldn't say this is a whole enterprise just because you work for them. Anyways, let's keep going. So those were the three things that they needed to prove against Diddy. Of course, Diddy is going to qualify for all of that because he is the organization, right? He is the organization, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and keep going with the facts that she was going with. I went on a rant and lost my train of thought. Okay. The members of Diddy's security team were also a part of the inner circle. Some of those security guards had been working for Combs for a long time. Those lieutenants are particularly loyal and they were armed and ready, Slavic said. They were at the defendant's side for some of the most violent and threatening acts. I don't know if they really named which security guards was driving him around, though. I could have just missed it because I wasn't there in court, but I don't remember them naming, other than I think like D-Rock. I think they're going to come up a little later. Him and Karam was like the only people they actually name dropped. Is that the only people that they're going up, to try to get? I don't know. Okay. So let's see where we're at. She described Combs' assistants as the foot soldiers of the enterprise. She said they didn't blink an eye when they were directed to do something by Combs. Christina Karam, okay, that's her name, Christina Karam, Combs' former chief of staff or a member of security, even when it meant facilitating a crime. These individuals were all paid by Combs' company. She mentioned that Brendan Paul, a Combs' assistant, testified he made $100,000. Christina Karam made 6 times that, $600,000 a year. The defendant used the money and the gravitas from his business to facilitate the crimes that he and his inner circle committed. He was the boss of every member of his circle and he was in charge. And she said over time, the members involved in the enterprise would change a bit, but Combs was always there. He was the through line, and other members worked with each other and with him throughout the entire conspiracy. So, again, they worked for him. Are they actively a part of the organization? I don't know. I'm a little torn on this, y'all. How many corrupt businesses are there out there? And maybe somebody just has to work there to make ends meet. I'm hesitant to call it an organization. Like, yes, there's probably some people that are a problem. But I would rather go with aiding and abetting versus him, who's in charge of the company, paying people to do stuff that he wants to do. That is more piercing the corporate veil, and it's him at fault. I don't know if I'm ready to reach all the way over to the RICO. Let me know. Okay. The sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy trial against Sean Diddy Combs is heading into closing. Oh, never mind. I'm reading the wrong part. Sorry. Okay, so the government goes on to tell the jury they must unanimously find that Sean Diddy Combs knowingly and willingly agreed that he or another member of the conspiracy will commit 2 racketeering acts. Slavic said there is evidence on multiple acts committed by Combs' enterprise. Slavic listed the categories of crimes the panel can find Combs and the members of his enterprise agreed to commit, including distributing drugs. Okay, agreed to commit is a stretch for me, because I guess if your boss tells you to go buy drugs and you don't want to buy drugs, you can tell them no. I guess. Sure. Okay, let's just go with what they're saying. So we had 2 assistants come forward and say that he knew that Diddy liked drugs. And even one time, Diddy didn't even tell him to buy the drugs. He just bought them and brought them to the party because he thought that was part of his job description, right? Although you are not supposed to be buying and distributing drugs, he did so because it was part of his job. Oh my gosh, it's hard. I'm not trying to give the entertainment industry like a pass or anything, but people in the entertainment industry do drugs. That's hard. It's hard for me. Okay. So they agreed to commit. He's saying that they agreed to commit the kidnapping. One of the reasonings why they're saying that he kidnapped someone is because they told Cassie to stay in a room so that people didn't see her bruises. But if you're the security and your boss says, tell Cassie to stay in the room, are you agreeing to kidnap her? I think that is a stretch for me. For him to say, no, you can't come out. Did he say you can't come out? Is he also participating in kidnapping at that point? Because yes, under New York law, not allowing someone to leave is considered kidnapping. I think that's a stretch. That one's a stretch for me. The arson, if the jury agrees that they put Diddy at the scene with the female companion's DNA that was on the Mazel Tov, then sure. The arson, sure. Bribing witnesses to Combs' crimes. I thought he was doing all the bribing, but other assistants testified that they regularly held money for Diddy and paid for things out of the money that Diddy had them holding. So yes, he did bribe the security guard, but if a security guard is the one that handed the money over, are they also agreeing to bribing this witness? I don't know if we can put that culpability onto them, because you have to knowingly be doing that. Like, know that you're committed the crime. I don't know. The next thing is facilitating Combs' sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura and Jane. That one's a little sticky because they were booking the hotels and they were telling them to stay in the room and they weren't a part of the freak off. So that one, it's tough. Facilitating travel for Combs' girlfriends and male escorts for the commercial sex. They did that. They booked flights. They did all of the things. The forced labor, again, that one is a stretch for me for the enterprise as far as them agreeing to do that, because it sounded like that was more Diddy saying, no, you need to continue to work until I'm done with you. I don't think they are going to be able to prove that other. Now, yes, Diddy agreed to the forced labor, of course, because he's the one doing the forced labor, right? But when we start talking about these other people like Christina Karam and D-Rock, are they agreeing to the forced labor that these people are being required to work overtime without giving them overtime pay? And the HR people who didn't pay the overtime because Diddy ripped up the document saying that he owed somebody overtime. Are we going to put them into a part of the organization? That's the question. And then helping Combs cover up his crimes. The paying people off, the helping fix the injuries. Yes, they are helping cover up the crime. So yes, of course, all of these apply to Diddy. All of them apply to Diddy, right? And he's the only defendant at this point. So we can look at it as, yes, he's a part of it. There's no denying anything as this applies to Diddy. My question is it just Diddy or is it really a organization? Okay, let's go on. The prosecutor discussed drug distribution, telling the jury they were an essential ingredient to every freak-off and the way the defendant kept Cassie and Jane awake and compliant in the rooms for days. He fed them drugs for years, and you know he didn't get those drugs on his own. He used his enterprise. They were going around buying the drugs for Diddy. Diddy would direct his assistants and security to help obtain drugs. She listed examples of drugs that were found in Combs' home during the 2024 searches, including cocaine, methamphetamine, ketamine, and ecstasy. Okay, so that was some of the stuff that came from the searches. Okay, so that was good. I still don't understand what they got from the computers, but they did find the baby oil, although, again, the baby oil was never came out that it had anything in it other than him just being freaky. But the drugs, okay, they recovered that from the search. But I think they could have got like all the videos and text messages that they used from the phones and the phone carriers and things of that nature. But let's go on. Government said that the quantity of drugs is not an element of the crime. The only element is that must be proven, or that the co-conspirators distributed drugs and did so knowingly, which we know that they did if we are going to consider them to be co-conspirators versus employees. Let's go on. Once Combs received the drugs from his assistants, he gave them to Cassie and Jane. This is drug distribution, plain and simple. Definitely agree with that. They distribute drugs. Question is, does he have co-conspirators? And I think that the reason why I'm having a hard time saying that he has co-conspirators is because no one else benefited from these freak-offs but Diddy and the freaking prostitutes that he paid because they were getting paid. He was going to pay his assistants regardless. Now, I don't know. Again, I didn't follow day by day, but I did not hear, let's say that, I did not hear of any evidence coming out that said he paid them extra because of them going to pick up the drugs, or they got to keep a part of the drug money, or like that didn't come up. In fact, when he thought that some money was missing and when he thought that some jewelry was missing, he interrogated them in dark rooms for 5 days, right? So I think it's a sticky situation to say, oh, well, because he paid them a salary, they were a part of the organization or a part of his criminal organization. Of course, they were part of his regular organization. But piercing the corporate veil on him, I don't feel that comfortable extending it. And it's not on me because I'm not on the jury, extending it to his employees for wanting to be a part of it. Okay, let's keep going. So the government returned to Capricorn Clark's testimony about when she had to take several lie detector tests. Security locked Capricorn in the building and made her take a lie detector test over and over for 5 days. Capricorn was petrified. Again, his assistants are also victims of him. And we're also going to say they're part of the organization? I don't know. Well, I mean, I guess that happens in like drug rings too, because like if you betray the leader, then they might like waterboard you and stuff. So I guess I'm trying to compare it to that. The man administering the test told her that if she failed, they're going to throw you in the East River. You know that she didn't consent to this. She didn't want to be in the building taking the test, but what choice did she have? But you were saying she's a victim while also saying, that's why I'm not comfortable with it, because they're saying the assistant is a victim while also saying that they voluntarily participated in the enterprise. Which one is it? It has to be knowing and voluntary. But you're telling me that her being interrogated, she had no other choice. She had to participate in the freaking interrogation. So what makes you think that she didn't have to participate in booking the hotels and have to participate in the buying the drugs and have to participate in the telling the Cassie to stay in the room? I don't think that's fair to say. Maybe to certain of the assistants, if you're only charging certain of the assistants, but if you see that she's going through it and you see that the two dudes went through it, what makes you think that the other people are not going through it too? What makes you think he's not threatening them as well? Like I said, I feel like Diddy, yes, you can pierce the corporate veil on Diddy. He was using his company in an inappropriate way. And he was forcing people that worked for him to also engage in in his nonsense. But does that make them culpable? knowingly and voluntarily. And can we say, okay, well, this assistant was a victim, but this one wasn't? I'm sure we can. But who's going to decipher all of that? Because what I'm getting, there might be people on the jury saying, I don't think he had co-conspirators because he was threatening them too. Remember, it has to be unanimous. It could be that one person on the jury was like, no, they weren't co-conspirating. They were being victims. Now, people probably don't believe Christina Karam is a victim. And that's where we're going to get on like some sticky ground, right? But remember, unanimous. Could there be people on the jury that does not agree with this stuff? There can be. The government reminded the jury that Cassie Ventura's testimony about a 2009 incident when, after stomping on her face in a car, Diddy forced her to stay in a hotel for a week while her injuries healed. This is what we're talking about with the security and the kidnapping, right? Diddy's security guard brought her back to the house after she jumped out of the car and tried to run away. While she stayed at a hotel, Combs' staff brought her clothes and food, and his security team made sure she didn't leave. Were they required to do that on a regular basis? Bring their boss's girlfriend's clothes? Probably. The government told the jury they can be confident this happened because Combs' former assistant, David James, testified that he remembered bringing her ice cream while she was staying at a hotel. But it doesn't. Whatever. I don't think that completely correlates, but I get where she's going with that, but I don't think that completely correlates. This is kidnapping, keeping her in a room, and she couldn't leave, and she wanted to leave. She testified to wanting to leave. Under New York law, that is considered kidnapping. Under California law, that is considered false imprisonment, not kidnapping. They sued, or they brought charges under California law and New York law, state law. So they will probably succeed on kidnapping under New York state law. And I think that the prosecutor should distinguish that. I think she should, so that they know when they see that element under kidnapping under California law, they're probably not going to succeed on that one, because California law requires that you actually move someone. Even if that's her walking out of the hotel room and them grabbing her and like, no, go back in, that would be kidnapping. But what it sounds like they're talking about is that they just never let her leave the room, and they told her she couldn't leave. By force, threat, whatever. It's clear that Cassie did not consent to staying in the London hotel, but she had no choice. The defendant told her she couldn't leave. He had his security team telling her she couldn't leave, and Cassie knew what happened when people said no to the defendant. So again, it doesn't sound like they physically moved her, so they are going to have to succeed under the New York kidnapping, okay? The Christy Slavic said that Diddy kidnapped Capricorn Clark again in December 2011, forcing her to go with him and a security guard to Kid Cudi's house after learning Cassie Ventura was dating the rapper. Slavic reminded the jury that Clark's testimony about that morning when Combs came to her door with a gun and told her, "Get dressed, we're going to unalive Cudi, and don't give a F what you want to do, go get dressed." They drove to the rapper's house where Combs trespassed. Later that day, Combs wouldn't let Clark leave his supervision until she brought Ventura to him. Can y'all remind me? Yeah, okay, yeah, she did testify to going over there. You're right. She didn't testify to the Mazel Tov, though. I think that was the big thing about it. She did not testify to the Mazel Tov. Clark testified that she went to Ventura and convinced her to return to Combs' house, where Combs said she watched Combs brutally kick Ventura as she lay on the ground in front of the house. Ventura gave a similar account of that day event when she testified the enterprise purpose was to protect this leader, not protect Cassie, not to protect Capricorn. So they would be able to prove the kidnapping under California law because they're taking Capricorn by force, right? And they're moving her. They put her in a car, or had her get in the car and drove with her in the car over to Kid Cudi's house. And they will also be able to succeed under New York law because they're combining her movement. She doesn't want to go and they're making her go, right? Let's keep going. The assistant attorney Christy Slavic returned to the arson involving Kid Cudi's car in January in 2012 when the roof of the Porsche was cut open and a Mazel Tov cocktail was dropped inside. Of course, and this is how we get onto the speculation. Remember, this is criminal. 99% it had to have happened. If there's any reasonable doubt, the jury can say no. And it can only be one member. It only has to be one member of the jury that says no, she didn't prove that he did it. So she goes on. This is her argument. Of course, the defendant was behind this. Of course. One thing I learned in law school is you never say, of course. It is clear. Of course. Things of that nature. You do not say absolute as a lawyer. You cannot do that because it's never absolute. You can weigh the facts either way. Okay. So she goes on. She says, of course, the defendant is behind this. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that we're not suggesting the defendant personally cut the hole in Kid Cudi's Porsche. You heard the audio notes. The defendant didn't even buy his own soup. So he had people do things for him. He basically solicited services for someone to go and do this to Diddy's car. Now, is it likely that he did that? Probably, but I do also think that there is room for reasonable doubt on this part of the case because no one for sure came out and said that Diddy was there. Okay, they said there was a black SUV in front of the house and the police never stopped that SUV, so we don't even know who was in that SUV. So that's the reasonable doubt that we're talking about, right? And I could be completely wrong. The jury could say, no, Diddy's an a-hole. He for sure did this. He's a crazy guy. But there could be one person on there like, no, they didn't prove it. And y'all will be surprised about the people on the jury. They want you to write it out for them. If you didn't say Diddy was walking down the street by Kid Cudi's house 5 minutes after the Molotov went off, you don't say that. They're like, nope, didn't prove it. And then you got some people like, yeah, he probably did it. It just depends on who you have on the jury. And remember, the defense and the prosecution participated in the selection of the jury to try to get people that would be I lost my train of thought. That would be the most open, right? So if you don't write it out and say, hey, we saw Diddy doing cartwheels in his front lawn after the car caught on fire, there might be somebody on the jury that says, no, they didn't prove that. They didn't prove that for me. Or they could all say, no, yeah, they proved it because he's strange. He's a strange man. He is a strange man. And the other thing about the arson is they dropped something about the arson. They said it could be a predicate act for the RICO, but also they weren't really going after it on the RICO. So I was a little bit confused about what they meant about that. But either way it goes, as far as like them just engaging in the activity. I'm trying to think where I was going with that. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought. So Slavic said the defense has tried to suggest that Combs had nothing to do with the arson, but the evidence and basic logic suggests otherwise. The government pointed to Ventura's testimony where she said Combs told her he was going to have Kid Cudi's car blown up when he was out of the country. Now, I have to admit, I was a little bit disappointed about the car not actually being blown up. Yes, did he set it on fire? Absolutely, that qualifies for arson. But everybody kept saying he blew his car up and he did not blow the car up. It was not blown up. It was set on fire. Okay, I don't like that language. Be literal, y'all. Okay, what are the odds that the car the defendant just said he was going to blow up got blown up? It didn't get blown up. Okay, and the coincidences keep coming. It got set on fire. Okay, she pointed to an email Cassie Ventura sent in December 2011 and that detailed some of Combs' threats, including that Combs threatened to hurt her and that Cudi, to hurt her and Cudi, but not with his own hands, that he'd be out of the country when it happened. So again, they're wanting us to draw that conclusion that he says, I'm going to hurt Kid Cudi, but my hands are not going to get dirty. Someone else's hands are going to get dirty. I'm going to solicit someone's services and go do that, right? They want the jury to jump to their conclusion. But guess what? The defense is going to get up there and they're going to give their closing arguments as well. And there might be somebody on the jury that jumps to the defense's conclusion and not the prosecution's. Like we know, okay? We know it was probably Diddy, right? I'm not acting oblivious. I'm just saying what the jury can do, right? We never know. Juries are so unpredictable, okay? What a coincidence that the man Sean Combs hated and wanted to hurt had his car lit on fire just 2 weeks after the email was sent. She referred to the meeting between Cuddy and Combs following the incident when Cuddy said Combs looked like a Marvel supervillain. What are the odds that after the meeting with Cuddy agreed? What are the odds that after the meeting when Cuddy agreed to stop seeing Cassie, nothing else happened? No more break-ins, no more Molotov cocktails. And then years later, the defendant apologizes to Kid Cudi. That is quite a collection of coincidences. But of course, you know that is not a coincidence. You know what happened here. Now, I will have to say that wasn't a strong sentence for me just because only two things happened. Only two things happened. It's not like something was happening to him for like over a year and then they had a conversation and then it stopped. It's like it happened over a course of a month and then it stopped. So that wasn't a strong argument to me, but I could definitely see where she was going with it for sure. Let's keep going. The government is addressing the bribery executed by Diddy, which we all know is to paying the $100,000. In March 2016, after Combs assaulted Cassie Ventura in an elevator lobby at the Intercontinental Hotel, Combs tried to bribe the responding security guard with a stack of money. Israel Flores testified that he declined the money from Combs at the time when he responded to the scene and escorted Ventura to the hotel room. He didn't know the defendant had just beaten Cassie in a public area of the hotel, but the defendant knew what he did. Slavic said Combs attempted to bribe him. Give me a second, y'all. Got it. Turn on my alarm because my camera's going crazy. Okay. He didn't know that look, there we go. After Ventura left the hotel, Combs and his staff started damage control. He called Ventura over a dozen times and texted her repeatedly at one point, falsely telling her that he was being arrested. The police were never involved in the altercation, but Slavic told the jury Combs was manipulating Ventura. The defendant knew what he had done and knew the potential consequences. He knew that he could be arrested if the police knew what he had done to Cassie in the hotel. Later that day, Christina Karam, Combs' former chief of staff and Combs' lead security guard at the time, D-Rock, began working to clean up the situation for Combs. Karam tracked down the video surveillance footage and D-Rock monitored Ventura. So again, those are going to be the two people that they are trying to get in on the RICO charge because obviously they didn't testify, and their name is being brought up a lot. And some messages from Karam were admitted into evidence, right? Christina Karam and Sean Diddy Combs both reached out multiple times to a hotel security guard, Eddie Garcia, to try to convince him to give them the surveillance video of the assault of Cassie Ventura. Finally, Garcia told them his boss would give them the video for $50,000. Only 48 hours after the defendant assaulted Cassie at the Intercontinental Hotel, Eddie Garcia went to the defendant's office to deliver his end of the bargain. This was a crucial moment for the defendant. He needed the video file. Slavic said Karam, Combs' chief of staff, and one of Combs' security guards were both present when Garcia met with a music mogul. Garcia signed the NDA that day. This sent a clear message to Eddie that he was not to speak about the incident anymore. Yes, when you sign an NDA, you are agreeing not to speak about something. Combs put $100,000 cash through a money counter, put it in a brown bag, and handed it to Garcia. The bribe is now completed. As Garcia was leaving, Combs told him not to make big purchases. That moment tells you everything you need to know about what the defendant's purpose of paying the bribe. Think about why the defendant said that. The government said this incident shows that Combs agreed to commit bribery and use his inner circle to get it done. She said it's a prime example of the workings of the enterprise, since the video showed the defendant assault Cassie during a freak off and the members of Combs' enterprise not stopping at anything to make sure the video wouldn't fall into the hands of law enforcement. And so I think right there, that's where you get it. Okay. The hunting down the video, that I could say they were a part of that, okay? You knew what he was paying for. I know we were given the example earlier of like, oh, if you didn't know, you were handing it over. But no, they knew they were handing it over and they helped him do it. Now, it sounds like Diddy is the one that handed over the bag, though. So I still feel like it's Diddy. Now, Karam definitely participated in trying to track down the video and all of the things. The question is, Did she have knowledge of what was on the video? I know I'm playing devil's advocate, y'all. I know I'm playing devil's advocate, okay? Did she have knowledge of what was on the video? Okay, so they said to give him the surveillance video of the assault. And so the way that the prosecution is wording it is that she had knowledge of what was on the video, and the fact that D-Rock was guarding Cassie. I don't know. I'm leaning more towards Karam might be a little bit more guilty than D-Rock. Okay, because he is his security, so he would go with him anywhere. I'm being devil's advocate. I know, y'all. I know. Okay, so that was the bribery. We know Diddy is gonna be guilty of it. Okay, we know he did all the things, but do we have an organization? Maybe on the bribery one. I'm thinking we do on the bribery one. Okay, I will give them that one. Okay, so the prosecution told the jury they can find Sean Diddy Combs' enterprise helped him commit sex trafficking with Cassie Ventura and Jane. Combs is also charged with 2 counts of sex trafficking by forcing Ventura and Jane into sexual encounters with male escorts through threats, drugs, lies, manipulation, and violence. This is not an attempt to criminalize dysfunctional relationships or unconventional sexual preferences. We talked about that earlier. The prosecutor acknowledged that both Ventura and Jane agreed to try freak-offs and hotel nights at the beginning of their relationship with Combs. Slavic told the jury doesn't need to find that all or majority of the freak-offs or hotel nights were a product of force or fraud or coercion. The law also doesn't require Ventura or Jane to have explicitly said no to Combs at the time or try to run away. The government showed the jury images of 27 men that 27 is crazy, that Combs hired to have sex with Ventura, Jane, or both. This slideshow shows the subset of strangers who had sex with Jane and Cassie. So yeah, that is a lot. And like I said, we know Diddy did it. Okay. We know Diddy did it. Diddy is guilty of sex trafficking. Okay. There's no way around that. That's why they have the separate charges. Remember, he has 5 charges that he's going through: the RICO, sex trafficking of Cassie, sex trafficking of Jane, prostitution of Cassie, prostitution of Jane. Those are his 5 causes of action. 2, 3, 4, 5 are met. What's not, or not, but the question is number 1 met? The RICO. I know he's going to jail for the trafficking. Okay. Unless there is a person on the jury that does not think this was forced. And that can definitely happen because we have a jury of 12 people, 8 men. Remember, 8 men, 4 women we're talking about here. So there could be someone on that jury that says, no, they weren't forced. There could be someone, which is a dangerous game to play. Juries are dangerous. Juries are a dangerous game to play. But we know here on the BriHive that he's guilty, right? We just don't know if everyone in the jury room knows that. Okay, so let's see. And so I'm not going to go over everything with Cassie and Jane because they basically go back and forth of he had them participate in these things, then he would beat them up, and then he would have them participate in things, and the friend saw it, and he would beat them up, and then they would say, no, they didn't want to do it, and he would say, no, you still have to do it. The thing that shocked me, which I think I missed in Cassie's testimony, and I didn't really pay that much attention to Jane's testimony when she was on the stand for 5 days, they were saying that he was making them do the freak-offs while on their cycle, and also while having active UTIs. That is very dangerous and unacceptable. He should not have been doing that. I don't understand how you get off on something like that. And I don't know how I missed that during Cassie's testimony, unless it was mostly talked about during Jane. So they go back and forth with that. And I'm saying I'm skipping all of this because it's a lot of information, and we are already 1 hour and 15 minutes in. And your girl got court in the morning. Your girl got court in the morning. So let me see. Okay, let's see. So we got the kidnapping. He's guilty of that. We got the bribery. He's guilty of that. We got the sex trafficking. He's guilty of that. The prostitution, also guilty. Guilty. He was flying people across state lines to do it. And remember, with the prostitution, let me get into that. With the prostitution, he doesn't have to be like selling them as prostitutes, which is originally what I thought had to happen. I thought he had to be selling them, or he had to be making money off of the prostitution. But no, it's literally just you're crossing state lines in order for someone to engage in prostitution. So they cross state lines and then they paid an escort, right? Diddy's argument is that, no, we were paying them for their time. Yeah, but their time consisted of maybe talking to you for 5 minutes and then y'all get into the business. Like, that's paying for prostitution, okay? I don't know how he's going to get around that. So we know that he's going to be, my inclination, I'm saying we know, and that's just assuming that all the jury people are in their right mind. He should be convicted on the trafficking and the prostitution for both the victims. Let me see, what else was there? Telling them they can't leave, telling them that he's in love with them, paying for their apartments. Basically, they couldn't not do it, because if they didn't do it, then he wouldn't pay for their apartment and then they'll be homeless. So the fraud, the coercion, all of that stuff is there with Jane and Cassie. They're saying that the assistants and the other people were involved because they like set up the hotel rooms and they brought the drugs, and that's how they're trying to establish the criminal enterprise. But I don't think they really focused on any information about like Christina Karam actually bringing the drugs. It was those other assistants that he also threatened that were also victims of him in some situations. Those were the people that testified to bringing drugs. I don't think anybody ever testified to Christina Karam doing it. D-Rock was just the security guard that guarded the doors and made sure they couldn't leave. And again, what I think is going to happen, if they can prove this RICO enterprise with Diddy, is going to be getting D-Rock and Christina Karam basically to take a plea deal. And what I would imagine is that they wouldn't even do jail time. I could be wrong, but that's what I think is going to happen if they can prove the RICO here, if they think that this was a criminal organization. I'm still leaning more towards it was Diddy abusing his power and knowing that people want to be in the industry. Pierce the corporate veil on him. That's where I feel it. Like I said, Christina Karam may be just as evil as him. I don't know. D-Rock sounds like he was doing his security jobs. They didn't really put a lot of emphasis on him from what I have been able to keep up with, other than him being a security guard, which makes sense. Like, he's gonna guard the door. He probably guards the door when Diddy is in there. But being an active participant, like pistol whipping people because I'm Diddy security, like, I needed some information like that. And then the jury might feel that way too. I needed some information like that versus him just being there. That's what I got from it. Definitely, if y'all got some more information, because like I said, I did not keep up with it day by day. I just kind of caught glimpses and pieces of it when I had time. But it sounds more to me of him doing his job. Christina Karam might be a little more culpable, in my opinion. So let's see. They said Cassie's abuse lasted 10 years. We know that. It's a lot about Cassie and Jane. They showed the footage of him dragging Cassie during the closing argument, so kind of reminded them of what was going on there. They talked about the coercion and force of asking her parents for $20,000, yet he had a bank account with 3.4. The bank account they deposited into had $3.4 million in it, and he withdrew $2 million. Sorry. So they're saying that was not a means of him needing the money, but more of a means of control. Like, if your daughter doesn't get it together, you guys are going to be the one paying for it, so you better get your daughter in line. Essentially, they didn't say all of that, but that's what I took from that. Let's see. It was like, the defense is going to argue, if it was so bad, why'd she stay? Coercive, control, financial, all of the things. The man was absolutely abusive. I think he is going to get what is coming to him on what he did to these ladies, with his weird self. Let's see. Okay, and so let's get into the payment then. because that's where I'm trying to get into. How do we bring these assistants and everything into this, right? How do we get them to be culpable? Because remember, it has to be knowing and voluntary. You can't just be doing your regular job. Like your boss tells you to book that hotel, so you book that hotel. For Christina Karam, you booked the hotel because you knew it was about to be a freak off, right? That's what it is. Okay. So let's see. The government turned to the sex trafficking and in relation to the racketeering charge. Just like with everything else, Diddy did not do it alone. He needed help getting drugs for the freak-offs, getting cash to pay escorts, and he needed help keeping Cassie and Jane in line. For those things, he again turned to his most loyal lieutenants. Christina Karam, Combs' former chief of staff, helped him set up hotel rooms and get strange men. Why are you calling these people strange men? Okay, that's their job. They're escorts. Stop calling them strange. I mean, it might be strange, but you don't have to call them that. Okay, she would help them get strange men to access the room. When Jonathan Perez, one of Combs' assistants, saw a video of Jane having sex with an escort, Karam interrogated him about it. Christina Karam knew that what was happening in those videos was wrong. She did damage control. One of Combs' longtime security guards, D-Rock, took away Ventura's belongings, brought her back to Combs when she ran away, and tended to her injuries. It would be absurd to think he didn't know what Cassie and the defendant were doing for days at the time and over. So again, that right there lets me know that they did not put on evidence that he knew exactly what was going on. And again, devil's advocate, he could literally just be doing his job. He know that his boss is a crash out. He probably messed up with his girl. Yes, he hits his girl sometimes. You probably got people, not you personally, people on YouTube, but there are probably people in your family that coddle men that beat on their girlfriends, right? And so what they're trying to do is hold the security guard that gets paid to do what he do to go pick her up and bring her back, right? To tell her she can't leave, because on a regular night, even when she's not being abused, if there was ever any night where she's not being abused, he probably was still in charge of kind of keeping track of her and driving her around and being a bodyguard so that she doesn't get hurt. That's what they have security guards for. So this sentence to me, Show, is absurd to think he didn't know what Cassie and defendant were doing. He might not. He might have known, but that doesn't mean that you're knowingly and voluntarily participating in it. Now, them talk about Christina Karam doing damage control and like, don't leak these videos. You better, get yourself in line. Don't do that, and then he won't hit you. That is more participatory to me. But him trying to help her while also not getting threatened himself, I don't know. And it could be because I wasn't really paying attention to any of the testimony about him. It's kind of hard for me to say he was culpable. And even it's hard for the defense to say he was culpable, right? It's more speculation. Slavic said it defied logic to think that Combs' most trusted lieutenants were totally in the dark. They knew what he was doing and they helped him do it. I think that's a thin line. But okay. They go over the transportation, which we kind of already talked about. I kind of skipped around on this because I knew it was a lot about the trafficking part of things. He created a climate of fear. Definitely agree with that. And then we're going to get into y'all chats. So if y'all got thoughts, let me know. Let me know. I know I've been playing devil's advocate on it. And it's really because the jury can be very unpredictable. And I'm trying to think of it from not creating a slippery slope, right? Of someone literally doing their job and then being charged with criminal things, right? So yeah, they may be able to get him on the bribery thing, and I'm talking about D-Rock. They may be able to get him in the arson if he was the one that drove the car. We don't even know who's the person that drove the car, right? Over to the Kid Cudi's house, or who drove the car over to the restaurant, things of that nature. So, sorry, y'all. I'm losing my train of thought because I'm really tired. I'm really tired. Okay, so let's see. Slavic said that there was significant evidence that Christina Karam, Sean Diddy Combs' former chief of staff, knew what was happening in the hotel when she helped plan Wild Kings Night, her term for a hotel room. Karam facilitated travel for escorts and ensured Combs received thousands of dollars in cash when he requested it during and after hotel nights. At times, it seemed like KK was disapproving, but that doesn't matter. She knew exactly what was happening and made sure that the defendant had everything he needed. The jury listened to an audio message Combs sent to Christina Karam. I want them to hunt for the sexiest, most unapologetic Wild King sex room in Las Vegas. He is weird. Okay. And then Karam responded, is Paul coming to Vegas? Because I guess he's the wildest and sexiest, I guess. Paul was basically someone who frequently came to these hotel nights, right? And then so they go on to say that they addressed the forced labor as an element of the racketeering. And so that was them making people work late. So let's get into this one. And we're almost done with kind of the facts that they pointed out. So y'all let me know, because I could be wrong. I told y'all, I didn't watch day by day. I didn't keep up day by day. So y'all might got some information. I don't know. So let's keep going. The government is addressing the forced labor. Sean Diddy Combs forcing Cassie and Jane into grueling long days of sexual encounters without sleep qualifies as forced labor. Combs forced them both to have sex with multiple men multiple times over multiple days, the women testify. They got sores, they got sick, they got infections. Both women testified they regularly got UTIs from freak-offs, and it got to a point where antibiotics were ineffective. And I'm telling you, I don't remember hearing none of this. And like I said, I wasn't really that in tune with Jane's testimony, but during Cassie's I was, and I didn't hear that, and that sounds horrible to me. This was not for Cassie's pleasure. This was work. Jane and Cassie both testified they would sometimes endure a freak-off or hotel night while they still had a UTI from a previous sexual encounter. When they told Combs they were tired or sick, he told them to keep going and finish strong. Oh, he's dirty. He's a dirty man, okay? Keep going. The government said that Mia, Diddy's former assistant, is also a victim of forced labor. The defendant treated Mia differently than many of the other personal assistants. He demanded more and he abused her. Mia was also required to provide sexual service for the defendant. He sexually assaulted Mia when Cassie and his other girlfriends were not around. She listed several SAs that Mia testified, including a time he forced her to perform oral on him. As Mia's boss, Diddy had all the power and control over her. He even thought, and so even though she never wanted to have sex with him, he knew that she couldn't say no and that she wouldn't say no. And again, if you know that for certain assistants, how do you not think that for everyone? Okay? How do you not think that for everyone? Okay, let's see. These essays were the most traumatic thing that ever happened to her, so much so that she planned to die with a secret, and y'all made her come and put it on. It wasn't on national television, luckily, but out for the world to see. Combs was also violent with Mia when she didn't do exactly what he wanted, including by throwing things at her and slamming her arm into a door. She also witnessed Combs being violent with Cassie. Mia saw and experienced extreme violence at her boss's hands. It's no wonder she always worried about her physical safety if she was to tell him no. After Combs was violent, he would enlist HR and other employees to punish Mia. He would often threaten her job, which was her entire world at the time. Mia felt she couldn't go to law enforcement because she had seen that Combs was above the police. The government addressed some of the loving messages and posts Mia wrote to and about Diddy, saying that Mia testified that sometimes the defendant treated her like the best friend and other times treated her like she was worthless. The highs and lows that Mia described were a cycle of abuse that created a trauma bomb. In the moment, Mia couldn't see it for what it was. And again, I think there could be some people on the jury that says, if this assistant felt like that, and the assistant David felt like that, and I forgot the other man assistant, he felt like that, and then we got Capricorn Clark felt like they couldn't say no, What makes us think that they're not going to jump to the conclusion? Because remember, this job, they're in this industry. They want to be in this industry. That's one of the arguments that the defense is going to make. Cassie participated in these freak offs because she wanted to be in the industry. Jane participated because she wanted to be in the industry. Mia participated because she wanted this assistant job. What makes us think that there are not going to be people in the jury room that says, no, he didn't have co-conspirators. He was the only evil one, right? But these people did what they had to do to protect their livelihood, to protect their job. And I don't think that the government, you can't say, all these people were scared. These two weren't. It's a very thin line for me, right? So I don't know if he has anybody. And the hard part of saying if you have someone that's voluntarily participating, I think it's really hard to say that he had somebody that was voluntarily participating when they were all just doing their job, right? They're not coming in saying, oh, you know what? I want to work for Diddy because he abuses women. And I'm going to stand on their backs while he abuses them. Like, no one's coming in and saying that. And so that's why I think that they're not going to be able to say that he had co-conspirators. Because if he's threatening them, what makes you think he's not threatening the other people? Hey, I don't know. HR department. The prosecutor said Diddy, former employee Capricorn Clark, was also a victim of forced labor. She worked for Combs off and on from 2004 to 2012 in different jobs enduring frequent threats to herself and her job, and he used force against her. Slavic said that the human resources department at Combs' company was a puppet for Combs and didn't advocate for Clark or the other employees. When Clark tallied up $80,000 in overtime that she was owed, Combs ripped up the paper and never paid her. Human Resources didn't do anything about it. It's Diddy's company. Like, yes, they have a job, but also they need a job, okay? The defense may argue that Clark was not forced to work because she continued to come back to Combs for jobs years after 2012, but that didn't erase the previous forced labor, and they basically said she came back because he blackballed her, essentially. Let's see. And then they get into the tampering with witnesses, and then, like I said, we were almost done a second ago, but we are almost done. But it's still a lot. Okay, so the government says for years, the defendant took great pains to keep his criminal conduct from being exposed. But many of the crimes that we've been speaking about were made public when Cassie filed her lawsuit. Combs knew the allegations in the civil lawsuit would lead to a criminal investigation, so he turned to his inner circle to help neutralize the people who could damage him the most. Paying people off with $100,000 in a brown paper bag wasn't an option. He needed to stay under the radar. The jury heard parts of recordings of 2 calls with Combs and James that were recovered from Combs' former chief of staff, Christina Karam's phone. Slavic said the calls occurred shortly after the lawsuit was settled. So the only reason the defendant is doing this is reaching out to Jane is fear of criminal investigation. The defendant tries to feed Jane the false narrative of the events of the past 3 years. What he says to her, he knows isn't true. It's what he wants her to say to protect him. That's witness tampering and obstruction. Slavic said Combs tried repeatedly to get Jane to say she was willing to participate in hotel nights, but Jane wouldn't, and when she pushed back, Combs cut her off. Slavic pointed out that you can hear the scratching of a Sharpie writing on the paper on the background of the recording. She said Karam was present but couldn't speak, as that would reveal her presence to Jane, and they were writing notes to each other. They were working together as a team. Later in the call, Combs dangles a carrot by telling Jane she wouldn't have to worry about anything as long as she was on his side. 2 days later, he instructed Karam to make sure the rent was still being paid. He basically kept paying her rent so that she wouldn't snitch on him, essentially. Same thing happened. The government said that Diddy attempts to convince Mia to lie or give false information to law enforcement in 2003 and 2024 are additional examples of witness tampering and obstruction. Combs had his former head of security, D-Rock, reach out to Mia after Cassie Ventura's lawsuit went public. It was the first time D-Rock and Mia had spoken in more than 2 years. D-Rock suggested that Combs and Ventura fought like a normal couple, and other who work. Does he think he just can manipulate everybody? Yeah, they just fought like a normal couple, right? Like, what was he trying to do here? They fought like a normal couple, and others who worked with Mia and witnessed the relationship dynamic felt the same. Combs and D-Rock were working together to neutralize Mia as a threat. Records show that D-Rock and Combs would communicate about their reach outs to Mia in late 2023 and early 2024. As D-Rock reached out to Mia, he updated Combs on their conversation and sometimes sent copies of Mia's messages to Combs. D-Rock gave her a false version of events and tried to convince Mia that everyone else accepted the story, then continued to reach out, eventually offering her money. At one point in February 2024, Combs called her 5 times in a row at 6 a.m., then texted her asking her to call him because he wanted her to jog his memory on some events. As the criminal investigation became more and more real, the defendant tried repeatedly to reach out to Mia. Mia testified she felt terrified and threatened by Combs' effort to reach her. At that point in 2024, Mia was already talking with federal investigators. So reaching out, doing all of those things, bribing her with money. Absolutely. We know Diddy did it. We know Diddy did it. The crazy part, and I think they are kind of poking their own selves in the foot, is that they didn't have them testify because they had other assistants testify, right? And they got immunity so that they can testify to what happened to them so that they couldn't be prosecuted against. And those assistants, D-Rock and Karam, could have also came forward and said, well, actually, no, he was threatening me too. I only did that because he threatened me. But they didn't really give them the opportunity to say that because they want to bust him on something else. So I do think that's interesting. You can't, I guess they didn't want to say every single person was being abused by Combs. You have to make it look like some people are willing participants, but you can't really say that they're willing participants if they also don't have a chance to testify as well. Because technically those other assistants that were buying drugs and setting up the hotel rooms, they're basically saying that Christina Karam did all the things that the other assistants are doing. But the difference is that these other assistants, they got immunity and they were doing those same things, which you can argue, no, those are voluntary. He was telling them to do it. They were participating because they wanted the job. But we don't get to hear from them and saying, oh, no, yeah, I did that voluntarily. Like when I signed my contract for this job that he said I had to threaten people and beat people up. And I was like, yeah, I got you, bro. Like we don't have any of that kind of testimony, right? So I think that there could be some people in the jury room that are going to notice that and clock it and be like, wait a minute, if this assistant was threatened and this assistant was threatened, why don't we believe that this other assistant was threatened or this chief of staff was threatened, right? If HR didn't even pay people because they were scared of Diddy, probably scared of Diddy, you think HR had a control of Diddy? Heck no. Nobody had control of Diddy. So some people might put that together. Some people might say, oh no, he was abusing his whole staff. Pierce the corporate veil on him. And that's why I think he's going to get convicted for the 4. 2 through 5 charges. But the RICO, that one's tough for me for the organization part. But y'all let me know. Okay. So she basically wants the jury to hold hold Diddy accountable because he's basically just been doing this for way too long. And she goes ahead and close out her argument with that. Okay. Let me see if she says anything of importance. Up until this day, the defendant was able to get away with these crimes because of his money, power, influence. That stops now. It's time to hold him accountable. Says all of this evidence paints a clear picture. They say don't say that in law school. Paints a clear picture. It's not so clear, okay, of how the defendant committed crime after crime for 2 decades, how he didn't take no for an answer. The evidence show you how he and his inner circle committed crimes and how far they would go to cover them up. So the prosecution's goal is to hold Diddy accountable for the nonsense that he has been participating in for the last 20 some odd years. Okay. And they only have to prove 2 for the RICO, that they engaged in an enterprise. And I think what could have helped them prove that was having the people they're trying to claim was part of the organization testify. Because, I mean, we can say these other assistants were also a part of the organization and they participated, but they all clearly testified that I didn't want to do it. I was scared of my boss. They all testified to that. So that might cause, they probably thought they were doing something good by not putting Christina Karam and D-Rock onto the stand, because then they could argue, yeah, I was scared of my boss. And then the jury is going to feel bad for them. Like, no, this was not knowing. This was not voluntary. This was threat and coercion by their boss. This was them trying to keep their job. They could definitely be on that same wavelength. And so I think I understand why they didn't call them, because they probably would testify to the same thing. Like, this dude threatened me too. But I also think it was a missed opportunity to show their knowledge and their culpability. And throughout the closing argument, the prosecution's position is, well, they had to know. They had to know. Yeah, but so did the other assistants. They had to know. They testified to seeing Cassie get beat up too, right? They testified to getting the money too. They testified to getting the drugs too. They had to know. They did know. The question is, was it voluntary? Was it knowingly? Were they also being threatened and coerced? And that's why I'm not okay with saying that there was an organization. And it could very well be that Karam was an active participant and his PR person or whatever. But how many, like, we've seen the PR companies come out with Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, just ready to protect who's paying them, right? Do we also hold them culpable for things, the SA that Justin Baldoni is being accused of, because he hired a PR team, his managers? Do we put RICO on them too? I think that's a slippery slope. So let's go ahead and jump into the comment section. Woo! Okay. We got Just the Fact saying, under RICO, the government doesn't need to prove profit. Yes, I know. We talked about that. Just a pattern of criminal activity tied to an enterprise. It's the repeated conduct that makes it racketeering, not whether money was made. Do you agree? I do agree with that. The point I was making is that normally it is that you're making money. It's not that, oh, we're just, doing this for fun. It's generally benefiting you some type of way. And generally that benefit is financially. Those people definitely were paid because they worked for Diddy. But the question is, if they were not under that job description, would they have been doing that stuff? Right? And like I just talked about, everybody knew what was going on, down to Don Richards, who wasn't even a part of the enterprise. Everybody knew what was going on. Okay. But they still was quiet. They still, backed them up. I think that's where it gets wishy-washy. The assistants were also victims, is basically my point. And the fact that they didn't have them testify, it could be good or bad. It's either, oh yeah, they didn't testify, so the government must have the dirt on them. They must know they know. But the government made it clear in their closing constantly, they had to know. Yes, we know they knew. We know they knew. We know they knew. So did David, so did Mia, so did Don Richards, so did the escort, so did all these people. All these people knew, right? And all these people were paid. The escorts was paid. They seen her blacked and bruised and bloody, right? They all knew too. Are they also a part of the organization? Because they didn't tell. They didn't tell till they got subpoenaed. That's my point. That's why I'm saying I don't think the organization is there. Like, yes, he had employees, but are they actively engaging? Yes, they're active. They are all. Everybody that testified was actively engaging in the crime, including Cassie and including Jane. They was actively engaging in the crime, right? but they were also victims, you know? I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Brianna says, I'm very behind, so listening on 1.5. See you in real time soon. Thank you and welcome in. We got Just the Fact saying the government is building an enterprise case against Diddy by linking his business operations to a pattern of organized criminal conduct, including sex crimes and coercion. I agree, but usually when they do that, it's because they're trying to pierce the corporate veil, meaning that if there's restitution to go after, if there's money to go after, they can go after his the money in his business bank accounts too, not necessarily make the people in the organization also guilty of what they're doing. So no, I definitely agree that his business is tied to what he's doing, but I don't know if we can make the people working for him guilty for what he's doing, if that makes sense. Just the Fact says Fahim and Ruben. Is that the I can't even think what it is. I can't even think what I was going for. Destined to Be says the state is given a very clear outline to tie the story together. I think so too. I think they are giving it, and like I said, I think they succeed on 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those counts: trafficking, prostitution, trafficking of Cassie, prostitution of Cassie, trafficking of Jane, prostitution of Jane. I think they succeed on that. And a lot of their bases for the RICO are those crimes anyway. And I do think that she's laying it out, but the absoluteness of her statements, I don't agree with. I think that there is reasonable doubt, and I think that there is a jury member or 2 or 3 or 4 that can say, nope, you didn't prove that. Nope, you didn't prove that. So, but I do think, yes, there are some other bad players, right? Do you just quit your job when they're doing something you don't like or something that you think is illegal? A lot of times people don't. People don't. The check is still cashing, right? Yes, of course you can get in trouble for it. I think it's a slippery slope though. Just the Fact says to Destiny B, I think you meant to say the government. This is a federal case, not a state case. I don't remember what she said. Oh, I think she said the state. Oh, yeah. Destiny B says, yeah, just the facts. You know what I meant. It's been a hell of a long day. I'm with you, girl. I'm barely keeping my eyes open. Destiny B says, KK is guilty too. She probably is. She probably is. But I think the multitude of assistants that they brought saying that he was abusive to them too might give the jury some sympathy. And I agree. I think they all knew. Every single one of them knew. Just like Cassie knew she shouldn't have been paying prostitutes for sex, right? But she was a victim. I think that the other people can argue that they're a victim too. And the fact that they didn't testify, y'all just saying this is what I found in their phone. You're not giving them an opportunity to even explain it, but you gave the other people an opportunity to explain it. So there might be some people that don't like it. Doesn't mean that they're not guilty, right? Like, because those people that testified, they're technically guilty too. That's why they had to get immunity. They are technically guilty too. So there's that. True. Cassie is technically guilty of some crimes. Jane too. Mia too. They are all technically guilty. They all knew. KK was a co-conspirator in my opinion. I gave my opinion on that, so I'm just going to let your opinion be. I definitely see how they're trying to tie it on, but I do think that reasonable doubt is created on the co-conspirator. Kimmy says, it sure seems like it to me to Destined to Be. I can agree. But so are all the other assistants that testified. And so is Cassie. And so is Jane. And so is Mia. And so all of them, everybody that testified, other than the police that raided the house, everybody is a co-conspirator. Right? Destiny B says, I don't think 12 people will agree on a lot of the charges. I think Jane really hurt the case. You think she hurt the case? Because she kept going back and forth with her purpose of being there, or what? Why do you think, if you're still here, Why do you think she hurt the case? Because she did go back and forth about wanting to be involved in maybe some jealousy issues and all kinds of things. I didn't get all her testimony, like I said, but I know some things that she testified to. If you're here, Tanya, let me know why you think she hurt the case. Kimmy says, what are the odds it's beyond a reasonable doubt, though? What are the odds? Oh, yes. Okay, I read that wrong. I was like, what? What are the odds isn't beyond a reasonable doubt, though. Yes. And that's my point of it. Like, sure, if this was a preponderance of the evidence, then sure. Guilty as charged, you're going to jail, right? But in this case, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the highest burden for court for somebody to prove. And with 12 people, maybe if it was not unanimous, then maybe, just maybe, we might get a conviction on the RICO. But being that it's 12 people, I don't know. I really don't know. And that's why they don't let lawyers on juries, because I would make that argument. If all of these other assistants are victims, why are they not victims? Yes, they all engaged in criminal activity. Every single person on the stand, other than the police activities or the police officers that we know of. They all did it. They all were victims. Or not they all were victims, but Cassie was a victim, but she was a perpetrator too. And I think that's what the defense is going to rely on. But that would be crazy for the defense to argue like, no, there was no organization. My client did this on his own. That's basically what they have to argue. In order to get the RICO, which I think carries the heaviest sentence, in order to get the RICO off the table, they have to say Diddy did this all on his own. He did not have co-conspirators. That's a crazy argument to make. And I know they're going to argue that all the free calls were voluntary. We know all of them were not voluntary. Like, there was enough evidence to show that all of them were not voluntary. And you only have to say no once. I definitely agree with that. But if they argue he did this on his own, I'm going to be weak. And I can't even be in the court. So I don't even know if they'll come out and say that. But that's basically what they have to argue. No, he did it on his own. I don't see him getting away from the trafficking stuff and the prostitution on its own. It as a basis for RICO, maybe. But guess what? They got kidnapping, arson, bribery, prostitution, sex trafficking. What else did they have? Witness tampering. I think there's like 2 more. But they have all of those. And they only have to prove 2. Only 2 is what they have to prove. They might be able to do it. If the whole jury is as unforgiving as some of the people in the chat saying Karam is definitely guilty, he might get RICO. Stephanie Russell says, I think after it's over, they will all be called informants. I feel like they sent them into spy on Diddy years ago, just in my opinion. I don't know if I'm going to be getting beat up to spy on somebody. No, that would be crazy. I never thought of something like that. But as far as who do you think was sent in to spy on Diddy? That would be my question. I don't think so, because I'm not taking no beating to have a job. That's one thing I'm not going to voluntarily do. Okay. But I play my devil's advocate for the night. And the big thing for me, like Kimmy said, what are the odds? This is a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. And we have to get 12 people to agree. And I know there's plenty of people in the chat that might have a spouse and got some siblings. And you know, even if you grew up together, you don't agree 100% of the time on everything, right? You have to agree 100% on everything. And I think the dangerous part, not to insult any men that are in the chat, but I think the dangerous part of this particular jury, and when we're talking about sex crimes, which sex crimes are really, really, really hard to prosecute, to convict on. This one is a little different because of sex trafficking, but like, you know, R word and SA and stuff, those ones are a little harder because it's usually just two people. In this situation, it's like pretty clear that that's what's going on here. I think that the men are dangerous in this situation. Or people might just be on the jury that are just, you know, freaky, and you take drugs. And what are they telling everybody to take spicy cubes in order to elevate your experience? Telling people to do weed to elevate your experience? They might not think it's a big deal. They like to do drugs. They did the drugs. There could be people, and I'm not saying it's right, but there could be people on the jury that says that. Like Cassie said, I couldn't do it without the drugs. They might see that as voluntary. With Jane going back and forth and saying, well, he promised me trips and he promised me that. They can say this is just retaliation. It sucks, but they can. There could be people on the jury that says that. Kimmy says, maybe they didn't call the co-conspirators because they have Fifth Amendment right and you can't put people on the stand just to invoke it. Exactly. So the reason why they didn't call them is because they plan on prosecuting them, right? I definitely agree with that. They didn't plan on prosecuting the two male. They didn't plan on prosecuting Mia. Mia actually participated in some or was a victim, considered to be a victim in this case, right? So they're not going to put them on the stand because they know they're not going to talk because they don't have immunity. The only reason why these other assistants talk to say this is what the assistants were required to do, right, is because they got the immunity. So yeah, you're completely right. They just would say, I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment. I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment. I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment. And they're going to say, okay, well, go away because you're not saying anything, right? But it could have also been different. They could have just said, I was also threatened. I was also coerced. Objection, non-responsive. Unresponsive. You can make those objections. But yes, they didn't call them because they have a Fifth Amendment right, and they are likely planning on prosecuting those specific people. If you haven't noticed, that those were the only people they mentioned by name that could potentially be co-conspirators that didn't testify, right? They said the HR department. They saw Diddy rip up the overtime $80,000. They said the HR department. They didn't say Jennifer over 8 personnel. They didn't say that, right? They're not going after those people. They're going after who they're considering to be the big fish. The thing that I thought was going to come out of this RICO part of the trial, I thought it was going to be big names, not his freaking assistants. Like how they tried to drag Jay-Z into it, right? I thought it was dragging everybody in the industry down. No, this is just Diddy and his freaking friends, or not his friends, but his employees. And I think that's where you get into kind of a slippery slope on this one. Because they are his employees and they technically are doing stuff within their job duty. Like I said, the PR thing with Justin Baldoni, are we going to say that they are also responsible because they're protecting him by saying the SA was not SA? I got that, Kimmy, the correction. But yes, you're right. They have Fifth Amendment. It could also hurt. Their testimony could also hurt or help their case. But they are, in my opinion, trying to go after them as the co-conspirators. But I'm a little disappointed that those are the co-conspirators that they're going after. I thought it was going to, like, I really thought them saying, what they said they had like 42 terabytes. What was it? How many terabytes did they have of information that they got out of Diddy's house? And it doesn't sound like they used any of it. Like even the recording of the bribery to, who was it, Mia or Jane? Even that recording was off of Karam's phone. And the fact that they got information off of Karam's phone let us know that they are going after her criminally too. If he is convicted on the RICO, She is getting charged immediately. Same thing with D-Rock. If he does not get charged on the RICO, scot-free. They're not going to risk that again. They are not going to risk it again, because even if they brought it against Karam and D-Rock and they were convicted as co-conspirators, they cannot then come and charge Diddy again, because double jeopardy. So him being convicted under the RICO is going to dictate whether they're going to bring charges against D-Rock and Karam for the RICO. So there's that. Janine says, I hope I said that right. So the jury doesn't have to find everyone was actually a conspirator. Can it only be one? It only has to be one other person. You only have to have a meeting of the mind with one other person. You can be a conspirating duo. It just can't be Diddy by himself. Okay? I'm leaning towards it's Diddy by himself and he's just bullying everybody. That's my position. And I think there's going to be at least one person on the jury that's going to be in that position. Diddy is a bully. Like, yes, he's a bad person. Y'all wanted to prove he's a bad person? Yes, he's a bad person. Now, do I think that they proved what everybody hyped up in all these lawsuits and they're sneaking in what was it, MDAM, whatever that drug is, into people's drink and people passing out and parties? I thought there was going to be literal videos of people partying in Diddy's house, intoxicated, not knowing that they were drugged. I thought that's what was going to happen, because that's what they tried to make it seem like. People are speculating that there were drugs in the baby oil, all of this stuff. None of that came out. Is he still bad? Yes, I agree he's still bad. But I thought so much more information was going to come out. They say he got secret cameras in every room. Remember all the lawsuits? Secret cameras in every room. And this is what he does. But this sounds like literal, personal. I thought he was like illegally recording people, forcing people into sex, other than his girlfriends, right? Forcing them into sexual encounters when they didn't want to do it. The escorts were there voluntarily. The girlfriends were there voluntarily sometimes. Sometimes they said no, then that came into the force and the coercion, but other times they were there voluntarily. I thought we were going to get so much more information. We already knew he was doing that to them. We knew that from Cassie's lawsuit. I think if they had, I'm glad they don't have that kind of evidence that he was drugging people and making them participate in those kind of things. I'm glad we don't have that evidence, but I think that would have made it more RICO. Like if his security guards, as soon as they walked in, they poured the extra drugs in their shot or whatever it is. They were mixing up the drinks. I think that would have been more RICO. But this, being a security guard and drugging people, that's not a part of your job description. It shouldn't be, right? Shouldn't be a part of your job description. But yeah, I don't know. If more information like that came out, I think I would be more on board with the RICO part. But he needs to be locked up for the sex trafficking and stuff. And again, there could be people on the freaking jury that says, no, this wasn't sex trafficking. This was just his friends or his girlfriends having sexual encounters with him. And they got mad one day and they said, no, I don't think that's force. There could be someone on the jury that says that, which sucks. But it could happen. Kimmy Locker says, does he have to be convicted with RICO to be convicted of crimes that are past the statute of limitations? I think the RICO only can go 10 years back, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not quite sure. I think the furthest they can go back on this stuff is 10 years. I'll double check on that. But I'm pretty sure it had to be within the last 10 years. So that the incident, all of the incidences that they went into closing arguments with, that was within the 10 years. So the thing in the Intercontinental, that was in 2016. The other freak offs, those were within the time limit. So I don't think so, because I think the RICO is only limited to 10 years. Janine says, yep, you said it right. I was hoping so many more people would be exposed. I feel ripped off. We needed more tea. Yes, that's what I thought. I thought it was going to be so much more information. Like, why did you take all them goddamn terabytes for you just to pull stuff off of his phone? Like, come on, dude. I thought everybody that had filed lawsuits, I thought Tony Busby was going to be right. Now we know he probably still lying in court papers. Like the one with Jay-Z that got dismissed. He over there lying, talking about they adding extra drugs into the drinks. Y'all had all the video, all security camera from his house. Why did none of that come into play? That would have been more a conspiracy to me, racketeering to me. But yeah, no, none of that came out. So yes, we knew he did those things to them. Yes, he should go to jail for him doing those things to them. I just don't know if they reach all the way into an organization. They could. Again, y'all, I'm not a criminal attorney. That could qualify as an organization. I don't know. But I do also think that there's some doubt casted of like, yeah, she was the chief of staff, but you think she's above being threatened by Diddy? No, I don't. I don't think she's above being threatened by Diddy. And I don't know how many of us in this chat will give up a $600,000 job. Hey, some people, you got to pay bills. And if it's not, and as sad as it is, some people feel like if it's not happening to them, then there's not much they can do about it, right? So I think there's a lot of people, as we've seen with the variety of people that was on the stand. Even they said that about Cassie. If it was so bad, why didn't you leave? Defense's argument is going to be like, she wanted to be in the lifestyle. That's the same argument Karam will have. That's the same argument D-Rock will have. That's my friend. I wanted to be in the lifestyle. I wanted to support him. I didn't think I was doing crimes. So, as we see, Diddy didn't get on the stand and defend himself. He a weird dude. He's a weird guy. But anyways, I'm rambling at this point. That's where I am with it. The closing arguments, I think they did a good job of painting the story of what they're going to. I don't like the absolute language that they use, like this is clear and of course and blah, blah, blah. No, these are coincidence. These are most likely, more likely than not, right? And that's not what beyond a reasonable doubt is. Beyond a reasonable doubt is I am almost 100% certain that these things happen. Not more likely than not. We're not talking about by preponderance of the evidence. We need hardcore facts. Yes, you can win a case on circumstantial evidence, but that's not the best way to try to win a trial, especially in a situation where the vote has to be unanimous. Sometimes we have like 7 out of 10 or whatever it is, whatever the vote is that you can do. But this one, or I think it's like 10 out of 12. That's not what we're having here. We have 12 people having to agree. And I'm sure you guys know 12 people. And I'm sure you would not, there are 12 people that do not agree in this chat. Including me. Including me. I'm a problem. I'm a problem for the jury, okay? So that's where I'm at. I think he should be convicted on the sex trafficking, the prostitution on his own. I do think you can pierce the corporate veil and say he was improperly using his business, and so the government should be able to go after his business's money for any restitution that needs to be paid. But I don't know if I'm not willing to step over the line and say RICO for the assistants that worked for him and the chief of staff. Although she might have also been evil and okay with everything that was going on, everybody that testified was okay with what was going on to some extent, to an extreme extent, actually. One didn't quit until they threatened his family. A couple of them kept coming back for more jobs. Like they knew all of this stuff was going on. They knew all this stuff was bad. So would we also put the voluntary on them? Why did we give them immunity and not these other ones? And like I said, sure, I thought there was going to be big fish. His freaking chief of staff and his security guard, who's probably his friend, is not big fish to me. He is the biggest fish. They caught the biggest fish. So why do we need him to go on RICO? At his 20s, 15, 20 years together, he's going to be in there for the rest of his life anyways. He's like 50-something, 54, I think. He's not getting out if they convict him on the other 4 charges. I know everybody wants him to be convicted on everything, but he gets convicted on the 4 other charges, he's in there for the rest of his life anyway. So that's where I'm at on it. Y'all let me know. I probably made people mad today. I'm not trying to make people mad, but I do think he goes to jail. But also, we got to get 12 people to agree. Anyways, I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. I'm sorry if that's not the analysis you wanted from me, but I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining me live. Thank you for everybody that hit the like button and also stayed to the end of the live stream. I will see y'all all on the next video. Bye.